Yeah. Hello, everyone. Here we are again with John Carter. He's going to give us some more information. The last week, I actually interviewed John Carter because he had some information. He had sent me some photographs from Fatima and in Portugal, and how he showed us photographs about how would you say, Freemasonry, I suppose, yeah. Evidence there, for example, the church that was built, was it next to or opposite the main? Opposite, right? With all kinds of signs and so on. So I invited him again. It was a very successful video, actually, and lots of you commented on it. And so I invited him back, and today he's going to tell us. Okay, you tell us, John. Hi, thank you for being here. You're very, very kind. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I thank you for having me, and I guess I'd like to start by saying I'm just a layman. I'm just somebody who happened to start studying and researching to try to figure out things that are happening in my life, specifically in Brazil and what I was involved in. And you got to be careful what you wish for. And that led me on an 8-year odyssey of pretty deep research. I've read a lot. And the last 2 or 3 years, I've only read books that were written by Catholic theologians or religious for the most part, because that's where the answer lies to all this. So I have today was going to show you about Brazil in particular. And I'm also open for criticism, and I'll let kind of the facts speak for themselves. I don't have to put a lot of my own interpretation into what I'm about to show you, but should I share my screen with you now?
Yes. Why Brazil? Why have you chosen Brazil this time? Yeah.
Brazil, because I spent half my life in Brazil, half my adult life. I lived here permanently 16 years, and another 14 years I've lived half time at least. So I was intimately involved in the culture and the economy, and when I started to research, and it really helped me understand Brazil and how important Brazil is geopolitically and also in this new world order and what's taking place. And being a Catholic country from the beginning, it's a lot different than America, and not the United States, which was founded as a Judeo-Masonic Protestant country.
So, but Brazil is Protestantism is taking over there, I hear, right? There are a lot of
devastating.
How are they doing that before you start showing us? But what is your take on they're very active there for some reason in Latin America, in the whole of Latin America, really. But Brazil is certainly very successful in their conversions to Protestantism. What is your take on that?
There was a plan. It was a well thought out plan by very bright people that was executed with military precision. It's part of my presentation. I'll get into a little bit, but simultaneously with the devastation of the Catholic Church, that created an exodus from the church. And like any good military ambush, you already provide the solution. And so the missionaries were already being financed by the Rockefellers and other foundations. And they were instrumental in inserting Protestant missionaries in Freemasonry, principally, into Brazil. And the Freemasonic network was already in place, the infrastructure to support them. And they have set up shop. And I don't think that when I moved to Brazil in the 90s, it was probably 85% Catholic. Today, I would say practicing Catholics, 50%, and maybe another 20% that are culturally Catholic. And the Catholic Church, you'll see my presentation, is not the same church from the 1950s prior. And I think that's part of it. It was a concerted attack and very wicked.
Okay, go ahead. Just show us what you had, and just feel free to say, yeah.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, let me just get this going. There we go. So I'll start with the book that called "I Will Be Done: The Conquest of the Amazon," Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. And it was written by a married couple from Vermont. I've spoken to them since I read this book years ago. It's about 1,000 pages, and I don't have it with me, or I'd show you that just about every other page I have underlined in people that I know. So I'm very intimate with the book and the details. I know the families involved. I've even worked for some of the companies mentioned. So this serves as a backdrop for what I'm about to show you. And this is just a whiteboard in my basement that I spent years researching and mapping out who I'd met, meetings I'd been to, who I was involved with, companies, all this in my head, trying to process and re-engineer go backwards and backtrack what was taking place in Brazil. So what I'm going to show you is simply based on the outcome of 8 years of research. In this book, I'm using some of their charts. They had very detailed charts of the post-World War II that it was established, the power structure for Latin America through the U.S. State Department, whereas Nelson Rockefeller was ambassador, basically Latin America, and his brother was CEO of Chase Bank, which was a bank of choice for all Latin American countries. And so they would come knock on the door of Brazil and say, "You want some money? Then you're going to let us in, and then you're going to let us come in with this whole host of American enterprises and Anglo-American corporations that will set up shop in your country, including Cargill, Archer."
Can you read some of them, because they're not readable? Just some of them. I don't know whether you can zoom it bigger or not, but
AT&T, Caterpillar, John Deere, Marathon Oil, DuPont, Motorola, Monsanto, the ag industry, banking, medical, everything you can think of, Amoco, Mobil Oil, Chevron, on and on and on. And at the bottom, you can see the military industrial complex. And what's very important to understand is that this was done through the infrastructure of the U.S. government. So John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles were both lawyers that worked for the Rockefellers. And post-World War II, Allen Dulles became the head of the CIA and John Foster Dulles the Secretary of State. So you had U.S. foreign policy that was deployed under the guise of the American flag, but actually it was for high finance.
Yeah.
And it included with all these corporations, and I've done this, if you go look at their CEOs, whether it's in media, ABC News, Global Television in Brazil, all of those CEOs are part of the Council on Foreign Relations, all of them, including Democrats and Republicans, senators. So it's a clearinghouse for, it's what's driving the executive branch and provides the pressure to guide U.S. foreign policy as well. So going to the next slide, goes into detail of the Rockefellers when, after World War II, the U.S. took control of the British Empire and became the new empire. It's this Anglo-American empire and run by the banks in the city of London and New York. And they deployed a series of investment companies and investment vehicles, and this is specific to Brazil, through Chase Bank, International Development Corporation, IBEC. It says Banco Moreira Salles. That was one of the Brazilian partners for the Rockefellers. That today is Itaú Bank, which is one of the top banks in Brazil, and also Deltec. And you come down that flow chart and you work your way all down to the bottom. I have blanked out the names of some of these companies and people because I didn't want to embarrass them, but I know them personally. I've worked for them.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. But being involved in this and seeing how the control grid works, each industry, whether it be timber, media, television, mining, minerals, on and on and on, they're all controlled. Had been seeded by the Rockefellers and their seed companies. where they would partner with Brazilian oligarchs and get part ownership of those companies. So that's what they do in every country they go to, or what they did.
What is the difference? Yeah. What is the difference? Because here, I know that the Rockefellers are the ones in America, especially. Here in Europe, we seem to talk more about the Rothschilds. And is that the same thing? How are they different?
Yeah.
Is there a connection? What is the connection? Are they relatives, or what is the difference there? Because in Europe we talk more about the Rothschilds, yeah, in France and everywhere. In America you speak more about the Rockefellers. What is the difference?
I think the difference is there's a pecking order. I think the Rockefellers are a recipient of initial capital seed funding from the Rothschilds in the 1800s to start Standard Oil. And just like the Carnegies and Steel, all major infrastructure in the United States was seeded somehow through City of London money, mainly the Rothschilds. And the infrastructure projects had front companies, but you could, even on this flow chart here, I can show you companies in here that I've researched where their money comes from. It's Rothschild Inc. So
yeah, read us the names of some of them, because it's I certainly can't read them. Just a few of them.
It's hard to see because it's kind of blurred. I don't have the book with me, but one in particular is Brascan, and Brascan controlled energy in the electric company in Rio and Sao Paulo, which was the major urban center of Latin America, of course, back in the World War II timeframe. And they, brass for Brazil, can for Canada. They're traded on the Toronto and New York Stock Exchanges. And they, I've done that research. I don't have it here in the presentation, but it was the Rothschild funded investment vehicle. So there's many of these in the world. This one's probably over $1 trillion now in asset management. Wow. So it controls mining, electricity, pulp, commercial real estate, and this is what comes in. I'll be going into detail in a second about how they deployed finance capitalism as a weapon, basically. Well, they knew without any shadow of a doubt that they would monopolize every industry within 50 years. They knew it because they copied the Standard Oil model and deployed it, and they built the business plan at Harvard with a Russian Jew named Leontief. And so this, going to the next slide here, going back to here, these are the companies and their connections in Brazil with the top oligarchs. Then you go to these next two maps in the book, and on the left you have a mapping project of the entire country where they map Brazil for natural gas, oil shale, other minerals, etc. They also have on the right, you have a map of Brazil. So mind you, this is not a Brazilian saying this is how we're going to develop our country. These are foreign interest. I think that's another difference. The Rothschilds, the Jewish ancestry, and the Rockefeller works globally.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up a little bit. John,
can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Put your volume up a little bit. Sometimes you break a little bit. If you do, perhaps you'll have to go and come back again. Yeah. But keep on going. Keep on going.
Okay. So what I was saying was that there's a partnership between high finance and Freemasonry. And on the right, you've got the IBEC Industrial Group factories where they were mapping out Brazil and other Latin American countries of what infrastructure they were putting in post-World War II through using the U.S. military, U.S. State Department as a bulldozer. So you blast your way into these countries, usually through some sort of false flag attack. You bribe them with money. You threaten them with food, use food as a weapon, but nevertheless, this is the maps, the result of a Harvard effort that was how the United States was going to form a global empire, and whereby the U.S. would provide the necessary gunboat diplomacy.
You're breaking up. Yeah. John, I don't know that you can hear me.
Okay. Internet.
Okay, you broke up again. Can you
Yes.
just tell us what you said in the last 30 seconds? Yeah. Can you hear me? No. John, can you come in again?
And the Rockefellers
All right.
used Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. The Rockefellers used the United States military gunboat diplomacy, as well as the CIA assets and their jackals, to force all these countries in Latin America to bow down, to let them come in with their companies and set foot and take control of their natural resources and their industries. So these two charts right here, these maps, were done in the 50s. And today in 2025, looking in hindsight, they have executed their plan. So they included the communications, control the media, and you control the people. And so they had a plan on local radio stations and the coverage. And they also had a plan on how to massive and how to.
Yes, you're breaking up, John. Is it possible for you to come back again?
So today, pardon me?
No, you're breaking up. I was suggesting that perhaps at one point you might.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. No. Okay, John, if you can hear me, just go out and come back again. Just sign in again because you're breaking up. Okay, so while I'm sorry about this, you know, he's in Brazil and communications. So, okay, here you are again. Okay.
Yeah.
You were breaking, I'm sorry, you were breaking up quite a bit. Yeah, the last thing we saw was the two maps, and you were saying that obviously this was not only premeditated, but we could see pretty well. Okay, yes, you were talking about that one, the consolidation process. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry that we need to complain to the Rockefellers about their internet service here. It's their companies. So when this is my profession. I'm in the cattle business, the beef business, and so I look at this map. I know people involved in this. This was specific for beef in Brazil, specific for the long-term development of Brazil into a major powerhouse in beef production, and into finally the consolidation of that industry. So in this case, what they're saying is you have a large ranches contrasted to small ranches, whereby the large ranches with capital, they have cheaper credit, they have access to volumes of scale, and they at IBEC, and they have access to the credit from IBEC from Rockefeller companies. That ranch in the middle, it's on the side. It says Fazenda Botucana, was a Winthrop Rockefeller ranch. I knew one of the managers there personally. He was my mentor, so I know exactly what went on there, who they sold it to, who owns it today, and then on the right you've got Sementes Agroceres, also funded by Rockefeller Capital. So they were controlling the inputs into the industry, seed companies, fertilizer companies, and they controlled also the purchase of that beef. So they created a model where they controlled the inputs and the outputs, and the ranchers in the middle. And so the price fixing, et cetera. And they knew that over 50 years that they would wipe out the vast majority of independent ranchers. And they did do it in the United States. The United States is just about dead. And the reason they did this, I believe, is they have a cheaper production cost in Brazil, about half the price of producing in Brazil than in the United States. And this is geopolitically to work in the big game, which is about to be called World War III. So remember, was done.
One word about that, because that is happening now in Europe too. Trying to affect the farmers. We saw, last year, for example, was it the Netherlands or someplace like that? And my question is, okay, so they practically control the economy. What is the role of the local governments here? What is the national governments? Obviously, if someone else controls your economy, controls your resources, controls, it seems, just about everything else, what is the role of the government? Can they do anything at all, or not at all, or nothing?
I will tell you what a senator told me to my face in his apartment.
What?
And I'll protect his name, but he was if I hint too much, then people will know who I'm talking about. So I'd be careful. But he told me, I gave him a presentation on the environmental movement, and he was behind it. And he said, John, that all makes sense. I do know one thing. There is not one Brazilian politician who is not owned by an American corporation. So he himself revealed that even himself is owned by a corporation, and they do the bidding of foreign interests. So the Brazilian government, there's two roles for it. One is to keep the people on the reservation, and the other is to open up the resources for exploitation by the looting machine, the machine that has come in, the same machine that sided with the Soviet Union and communists during World War II. Let that sink in, and wonder what happened to General Patton and why they killed him. So this machine is in total control of the propaganda through the media, of the political structure through backing the campaigns, and through bribery, extortion, blackmail, and all we do is serve like little gerbils in a cage running around, working at break even today and totally consolidating markets. So going from this slide here, that I think is important to think about is at the top it says Amazon rainforest. And it talks about developing the Amazon rainforest, which you don't run cattle eating monkeys and leaves. You've got to clear it. So the very people behind creating the impetus of the wherewithal to develop the Amazon are the same people today claiming to want to save the Amazon. It's the same people. It's the same foundations. And the reason what they're doing is they use us to do the dirty work. And when they want to control supply, they want to control land mass, they put the brakes on using the environmental movement and its infrastructure of regulations and legal structure to slow it down. And so that, and ultimately, their intent from the very beginning was to clear the Amazon, is to clear it. So these people here, we can't do this in 1 hour presentation, but people watching this, if you do your own research, it is irrefutable what they did and what they're doing today. It's irrefutable. So I'll go on to the next. This is kind of a summary, Lali, what we're talking about, the Southern Hemisphere control mechanism, basically a looting machine, and how it operates. A little flow chart. I put the United Nations at the top only because This is run as a supranational government. The United States is simply a battering ram. Um, it's not U.S. beneficial to the U.S. whatsoever. It's beneficial to the companies, and it's detrimental to both American farmers and ranchers and independent producers as it is to Brazilian farmers and ranchers and independent producers. But what they created was this mechanism whereby they use government as a weapon that creates this rigorous, murderous regulatory environment that pressures farmers and ranchers to increase their costs to abide by ridiculous social, environmental, labor laws, etc. Whereby the businesses that they control government, they control the multinationals. They force these businesses, which are theirs, to create certification processes, licensing, clean, supply, responsible, sustainable, all those buzzwords. And that forces this pressure down and slowly squeezes the farmer and rancher out of business. And then their hedge funds buy them up. And then they transform family farms and ranches, the basis of a free society, into a socialist beast. And the NGOs, of course, the environmental NGOs primarily, and they work as a triad, the trinity of evil. So they infiltrate government, they pass regulations, they find producers, confiscate lands, use international propaganda to take control. They offer the solution to take control. And what's ironic is I built that flow chart here on my own, and then one day I'm watching a presentation in Europe when I was at a World Wildlife Fund event. World Wildlife Fund, by the way, was created in 1961 after they had mapped the Amazon. And what they have done since is they have placed parks, conservation units, and Indian lands on all those lands that were mapped back in the 50s to take out those mineral resources from the private sector, so they didn't have access to it. When they came into Brazil back in the 50s, the reconnaissance of the Amazon was done by missionaries that was operated through a group called SIL, S-I-L. That's in the book, S-I-L. And so those missionaries would make contact with Indians, not to save them. Of course, they're not going to be doing much saving of souls because they're protesters or Protestants. You know, I'm just going to be honest. They're attacking a Catholic nation, and what they're doing is they're finding out what minerals in these reservations, what kind of necklaces they're using, what kind of how many Indians there are. Why? Because you need to know how many you got to get rid of. And so when they started titling lands and creating this development model for the Amazon, they were using simultaneously the environmental movement and a social indigenous movement simultaneously to create a false narrative that they could use to control development. But this chart that I've got on the screen now is a World Wildlife Fund presentation that shows we have consumers at the top, and they're trying to create pressure on consumers to force them to consume sustainable products, whatever that means. Well, I know what it means. They using investors, Rothschild, Rockefeller, whatever, capital to influence the supply chain in the retail companies, brands, manufacturers, traders, beef traders, grain traders, beef processors, in order to attack their primary risk, which are the producers at the bottom. And so this chart was presented as a solution offered by World Wildlife Fund to bring in sustainable development globally. And so basically what it shows is a monopoly model that was created at Harvard University in the 50s by Longteeth. So
and in order to just one question, in order to go in there, for example, the indigenous population, they have to divide the population. That is what you're saying, yeah? They have to divide the population in at least two camps, so that they fight one another, right? While they are doing whatever they are doing. Yeah,
That's the
they're doing
dialectic.
this.
Yes. Yeah. They have to have that tension, an antithesis and a thesis to create a synthesis. And that's part of the Kabbalistic mechanism that I'm going to get into in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening. And once again, I did not dream up these conclusions. This is coming from a tremendous amount of research and study and prayer. And I know I've ground truth this book with my personal time on the ground here. I know I've met missionaries that were here in the 50s. I know people who grew up with them. I used to do my maintenance of my aircraft with the very company that was set up by the Rockefellers to maintain the aircraft that flew in missionaries into the Amazon. I know them. I've heard them speak. I have talked to them about this. So this needs to be told, and this is the truth. So,
and the missionaries come from where?
They're mainly American missionaries, mainly from the South. Southern Baptists, and my Southern Baptist friends in Texas, God help you, but 40 to 50% of your pastors are Freemasons. So there's a dual sword where you have a temporal mission to contact Indians and supposedly save them and save their souls, versus the spiritual esoteric that you can't see, the occult. So it's a dual-edged sword. And make no doubt about it, that's what's happening. When we look at what's happening in the world, what's happened to the Catholic Church and the passion it's going through, you have to have eyes to see. It's not everyone that wants to see this or embrace it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So,
but what I hear from other Latin American countries where this division is going through is that they divide the population. It's all very much anti-Catholic. I can see that, but is to say, to create the doubt. They go even beyond religion to create the doubt that you see you are poor because you're Catholic. If you were Protestant like us in the North, you would be rich and successful. It's a very, yeah, sometimes it is done in a very subtle way, and sometimes, but it gets to the population. What is wrong with us? Because obviously our religion keeps us poor. But look at these people from the North who are so rich. And so they get the missionaries from the North, and they say, well, yeah, you listen to them. I mean, you want to, improve your life. It's done in very many ways, but I know nothing about Brazil, but I do follow other Latin American countries and what they are saying and their divisions, and it seems clear to us that this is happening.
I think the analogy is Henry VIII, and who was a very devout Catholic until he wanted to marry his concubine. And prior to that, 1,000 years of Catholic rule in the monasteries, and there was no poverty.
No, yeah.
And the poverty came after the looting machine took away all the Catholic lands, and it was a looting machine, and the Protestant Revolution was a looting machine. And that's what happened to Brazil. Is we don't know anymore what Catholic society was like here. I think what's been established, at least for 200 years, is a Freemasonic society, including the last king. And he just handed over the reins to the Freemasons and the military regime without firing a shot. And so at least in the 20th century, it was 100% a Masonic country taking over. And it had 100 years like termites eating the base. By the time I came along, and I was born in 66, it was already in the collapse stage. I just didn't know it yet. And so I think that's what they have done, is they are blaming the Catholic Church for the evils that were installed by them and their destruction of the economy by this consolidation, really the Industrial Revolution, which causes great grief to the working class. And so they're tricksters and liars, and they're lying. So what they have is power. They have the power of the word and the narrative. And so that they can tell the story they want, and the average Brazilian or Latin American would not have the wherewithal, intellectual prowess to counter it because they were not allowed to grow intellectually by the system. And so as all this is going on, that's why I put from edification, from a society where Christ was king, and in your day-to-day life, everything revolved around virtuous living, not greed. And next thing you know, you're in this profane world where you have to work 7 days a week, where all the buildings are ugly. And there was a takeover, and it was subtle, and it was like a cancer. And this is kind of the next part to get into, but this is a statue probably about a mile from where I'm at right now. It's the major monument in the town that I'm in. It was named for London, because it was developed by the British during the 30s and 40s. And so you see three people. It's always threes in a circle with a dot in the middle, which is a Freemasonic emblem, and it's got a lot of esoteric meaning to it. But basically, the onslaught that happened post World War II was an economic war that also brought as the economic war came through as the beachhead, there was a cultural war that came after that was then fortified through the academic institutions that had adopted Marxist philosophies and also modern art. And that kind of just hit the Catholic Church like the plague. And after, the revolution of the 60s, CIA-backed revolution, including Vatican II, which had strong influence from the American Catholic Church, you can see in hindsight the devastation that came to Brazil. The church, the edifying church on the left, was built in 1943, and this is I'm literally 300 yards away from that church right now, from where I am. And on the right, after, they just built that church, they tore it down, and
they tore it down.
They tore it down, and that's exact same geography, real estate that the Triangle Pyramid Church is on. It's the same place. They tore down the one on the left and replaced it with the one on the right.
They tore down that old church on the left and they built this one on the right. Yes, and we can see the difference already in the architecture.
Yes, and
a different meaning, I mean.
Yes, and with the quote above, we have, with mighty hands so much shattered the pillars upon which the old building rests. And that's from the Jewish Freemason, Ludwig Berney. That's in the Plot Against the Church by Maurice Pinay. And that's the same church. And I told you, a lot of this is personal. The crucifix on the left is massive. I would say it weighs 1,000 pounds. It was a gift by my wife's grandfather, who was a Spanish immigrant. Yeah, he was the one from Galicia. And he of course, left a Marxist attack in Spain, where Franco, who, thanks to for whom the bell tolls, is made out to look as this tyrant, was actually a hero. Well, there you go. There's my Spanish grandfather. My Spanish father-in-law's father donated that crucifix, which was in that original on the left.
Mm-hmm. Just want to add something there about what you said about Franco, because I'm going to do a video, John, because most people think of the Spanish Civil War as, the good democratic Republicans and the awful fascist led by General Franco and so on. And I was actually reading and listening to an author yesterday. I'll just tell you very quickly. I'm sorry for the interruption. But because you did mention Franco, I just want people to know that you're not insane, okay? Before the Civil War started, which was in 1936 in July, the 6 months before that, when the whole massacre of priests and bishops and I have figures, I'm going to do a video on that, 20,000 churches, monasteries, all that, 20,000, thousands and thousands of priests assassinated, 3,000 nuns. It was in that very short space of time, 6 months before the Civil War started. It was the greatest massacre of religious in Spain. And I say that because the Pope, when the new Pope, in his cross, when he was announced and he came onto the balcony, they wear a cross. And in that cross, and I'm going to show them the picture, I'm sorry for the interruption, it's a cross specially made for, someone prepared it for him with relics from St. Augustine and St. Monica and so on. But one of them is from one of those bishops, Bishop Polanco, who was assassinated, not only assassinated, but before that mocked in all kinds of ways. So what I'm saying here, I'm going to do a video on that, but those of you, if someone, when you said Franco and so on, you are not insane, because we have evidence of what happened before Franco rose. And it was during that massacre for 6 months of priests and nuns and burning of everything. And that was, of course, we know who incites that. It was at that moment that General Franco said, enough. And that was it. And then he rose. Okay, but okay, go ahead. I'm sorry about the interruption. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you said that. I've listened to you had a great, I think 3 or 4 part series on Franco. I listened to it last year driving across the U.S. And it made so much sense. Abe Lincoln was a pen pal with Karl Marx. So, Civil War and the Revolution go hand in hand. And so the crucifix on the left, hand carved from wood from the forest here in Paraná State, was taken down and replaced it with the flying Jesus on the right, which you take away Christ from the cross, you take away the sacrifice.
Yes.
And then and so here you've got Jesus flying through the air with a one eye behind him, if you can see the eye.
Yes.
And then you got the sun above, and you got the pyramid, and then you got the Last Supper over the altar, which is no longer an altar; it's a supper table. So they've taken away the sacrifice. So that's a subtle transition that's happening. And you can see it everywhere. And you can see a triangle underneath the mural of the Last Supper on the altar. It's full of symbolism, of occult symbolism. Of course, the triangle, the pyramids everywhere. And that this church on the right happened, of course, in 1973 was inaugurated. But these are churches that were built from 1968 to 2001 in the modernist. Modern is an incorrect term. It's communist. It was communist, and so they called them temples. The old temples were constructed by Rosso and Comanche. There were 2 architects. Here on the top left, you can see them on the left, and the 2 guys on the left. And they got their architectural degrees at the University of São Paulo. And University of São Paulo was a Rockefeller project. Okay, so this paper, there's a paper here. There was a doctoral thesis written about these guys. And it says the Brazilian researchers and his scientific association are focused on their links to the Rockefeller Foundation, the big, powerful, and strong North American philanthropy agency that established deep and long-term ties in Brazil, and their roles that were played at the University of São Paulo. And who are the architectural kind of mentors to these guys on the left? Well, these guys. You got Oscar Niemeyer on this. This is a Jewish Ford independent newspaper or nonprofit that has this article on Niemeyer. He was of Italian ancestry, who did work with Brazilian Jewish architect Elias Kaufman, on and on, and then did projects for Robert Burrow Marx, and that's who the guy is on the left. He's the most famous architect in Brazil. He spent a lot of his time in the Soviet Union. He's the one who laid out Brasilia, the capital. And so he was a Marxist communist. On the guy on the right, Gregory Warchowski, whatever his name is. He was from the same background as Niemeyer. He was also in the Communist Party in Brazil. And the guy in the bottom right, João Batista Artigas, was also awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship, University of São Paulo. If you dig into these people, you're going to find their Marxist philosophy behind everything. So the Catholic Church, post-1960s, the new churches that were built by Marxists, mainly atheists for the most part, and mainly Jewish. So here's the inside of the cathedral here in Londrina. Oh. On the left, you can see on the outside the triangles, the pyramids. On the inside, as you come in, it certainly does not have a Catholic feel to it. It's got a very dark feel to it.
There is nothing Catholic about that. Nothing Catholic.
No. And this dissertation by Rafael Rodrigues de Moraes, it says in Portuguese, I can read part of it. The objective of this research in his dissertation was to demonstrate that the Londrina Cathedral contributed to the local urban landscape, the changes that happened across the country, because these models were then correlated across other churches that were demolished and rebuilt in this style. And in red, it says ideas, rationalist ideas. Well, that's Freemasonry and modernism. And then the substitution of old temples for new models in Brazil. And of course, it says at the bottom, this has happened post-Vatican II, in large part because the local population wants to modernize. No, that's kind of a lie. They did the modernizing for us.
Yes.
Here on the left, you can see a close-up of the altar. And there's the Bishop of Londrina giving the Eucharist to a Muslim. So he's not giving it to a Catholic that hadn't been to confession. He's not in a state of grace. He's giving the Eucharist to a Muslim. So
I think I saw this video, and then actually you see, I think it's the same one actually, and then you see he gives him the host in the hand, and then you can see him turning away and putting it in his pocket or something like that, right? Yeah, right. I saw this video. Yeah.
So that speaks for itself. So here's our local parish. It's about 3 hours from where I am, and if you read from Archbishop of Port Louis, Msgr Leon Morin, in his book Philosophy of Freemasonry, which I've read, during the Revolution of 1848, which was led by the Grand Orient of France, its Grand Master, the Jew Cremont, that in place of popes and Caesars, a new kingdom, a new Jerusalem will arise. This new temple of Solomon. So, I mean, look at this church here, which they just removed the tabernacle from, and they took it and placed it on the side of the church. They've hidden it from the altar, took it off the altar. And the pyramids, you got the sun. And so this is all Freemasonic occultism. It's a new temple. And this is all over Brazil. These churches are everywhere. The vast majority of them are this way today. So that takes me to what's happening in the takeover in Freemasonry. There's a big Freemasonic emblem in the middle of the country in the town I used to live in. And then the two most important Freemasons of the 19th and 20th century, Albert Pike and Manly B. Hall, saying what really Freemasonry is. It is a religion, and it's a religion of Lucifer. And it works in the darkness. So this is the headquarters of Freemasonry in a town called Goiânia. It's in the center of the country. There's hundreds and hundreds of residential buildings there, housing, apartments, etc. Hundreds. None have antennas like that. None. There's only one building on top of the hill by itself that has these antennas, and that whole building is the headquarters for Freemasonry in Brazil. So who are they talking to, and who are they communicating to? And it's not because they're the highest building, because those buildings are higher. Entrances into all the cities in Brazil, post-1960s, you have symbolic imagery from Freemasonry. We have pillars with three. You got the circle. You've got the star. You've got in the middle an obelisk. Of course, you got the rotary with the pendulum. You got more three columns on the right. You've got another star. And then you go through towns in Brazil. You don't see Catholic schools anymore. You see Montessori schools, which I don't know if you know much about Montessori, but it's Steiner and philosophical idealism and theosophy in Madame Blavatsky. And this is the
really.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a connection between
yeah.
Montessori.
It's organized naturalism. It's Jewish Kabbalah. Montessori schools are, they're all over the United States, and they're kind of the high end where they set them up in Brazil near gated communities where you have the rich are living. So their kids get indoctrinated into naturalism. Once Catholic people. So you see this symbolism everywhere, with the Star of David, the star with the Masonic emblem in the middle, and then you'll see cultural spaces that have Masonic columns, three columns like those blue columns in the middle, and there's a name, Kun, K-U-H-N. Well, Kun Loeb, think about some of the owners of the U.S. Federal Reserve and who backed the Bolshevik Revolution. So these, what's irrefutable is what Rabbi Isaac Wise said, is that Masonry is a Jewish institution, hands down, 100%. And at the bottom, you read how it's used, both to subvert Catholicism, but also as an economic engine. And the Masons are an elite organization for the standard entrepreneurial class, not high finance CEOs of companies, but your average Joe that starts his own company. It helps them in their personal business ventures. And so what you'll see is, that I'll dive into really quickly, is when you look at the logos of major corporations, which are not run by small-time entrepreneurs, it's high finance. It's the Vanguard, BlackRock network of corporations that all have this occult, whether it's sun on the right, the sun logos are in the middle of the triangle, the pyramid, or on the left, the circle with some sort of chevron or line underneath it. That's what you find. At the very top, you'll see the dollar bill right underneath it, YPO, Young Professionals Organization. So there's your pipeline for CEOs across these corporations globally. So that kind of gives you an idea of the genre of Masonic symbols. And then you're going to come in. These are pictures I took since you asked me to come on today. I just drove around town and drove across the country going to our ranch, looking at signs in all the towns I drove through. And I just took pictures as I was driving. So they're kind of bad, but you'll see on the left 3 chevrons in the mall. Then you see another 3 chevrons, and you see 3 pyramids, and then another one with 3 pyramids. And the bottom you got stars. You always have 3 stars in the Social Environmental Award, stars on a motel, and stars on another motel. Always 3. And on the right you've got the bars. Always 3 bars.
What does it mean, the number 3 then?
There's different. I mean, when you go and study the Kabbalah, there's so many meanings. There's so many esoteric meanings.
Right.
I didn't want to get into it because
yeah.
You can go do it, but people can go check. But that's kind of serves as bait for people to do their research and figure out what they mean.
Yeah.
You're going to see flames and phoenixes. Santander, the Spanish bank, which has a huge presence in Brazil. You get flames represent very, very dominant in Kabbalah. You'll see it on the Seventh-day Adventist churches here, those flames. There's 2 different, one's on the school, one's on their church. You're going to see the phoenix broadly displayed. And then you got the star, of course, the communist star, the Marxist star on Heineken. They didn't have this on Heineken here up until a couple of years ago. They just changed the label. And now they're boldly putting it out there. You see the star on buses, on schools. Then you have the Freemasonic apron in the middle and underneath you have a tractor store that has an apron on its logo. Then you have on the left and the right the W and the V, where you can see the Freemasonic sign that's displayed in both of those. Yeah. And so what's the reason for this? Well, these guys are Masons. These store owners are all Masons. And so they're sending the signal to other Masons that they're Masons so that they get preferential treatment by each other. The police force will give them preferential treatment, the justice system, because they're all Masons. So you go into the pyramids, and the pyramid or the triangle is the most prominent of logos. And you think, well, could this really be, this could just be happenstance, which in some cases it could be. And I would say that I'm guilty for having used these symbols because of ad agencies and marketing firms that only gave us options to choose symbols that were Masonic. Didn't give us any other choices. And so some people might have been tricked, but I don't think so. I think most are actually Freemasons they're signaling to the community. Because if you drive down the road in Brazil today, at least a third of the logos are this, a third. And that's not happenstance. You got chevrons everywhere, even Chevron, the oil company. But you like the XB, you can see a chevron, how it's drawn in there. You can see the logo beneath it with the chevron underneath it. You can see a chevron on the church and with a dot above it. That dot is Kabbalistic meaning as well. And of course, you got sun. You got the sun on the left with the one eye in the middle. Suns at schools, businesses. And anyway, the last one is a brand, because we're branding ourselves, we're branding society. They have branded Catholic countries with these Masonic symbolisms. You don't see the crucifix anymore. You don't see Our Lady of Aparecida, Nossa Senhora de Aparecida, which is the Brazilian patron saint of Brazil. What you see is a country that's been taken over with Marxist, communist churches, block, concrete, ugly, profane, and you see the Catholic Church under siege. And this brand is my brand with my wife. We used to have our own family brands, my brand from Texas, her brand from Brazil, and we would fight each other on what we're going to brand our cattle with until we finally realized that we were married in a partnership with three people, me, her, and God, and Jesus Christ. And that brand meant that we were family, and so we made our own brand as a family brand, CC, which is our names, Carter, Sid, as well as the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. So the CC for us stands for, when we brand, we ride for the brand. We ride for the brand and refuse to bow down, refuse to be quiet about what's happening. I mean, it's criminal. It's criminal not to bring this up. It's criminal not for people to call out who's really behind. And it's not just Freemasonry. Freemasonry is simply, it is simply a weapon of the synagogue, of the Pharisees. It's that simple. I want to talk about it. That's what's happening. That's true, Nostra Aetate, and we're living it today. And we're getting squeezed, and we're going to be squeezed out of existence. But what I think about the brand, though, is you got the fire, you've got the burning, you can see the destruction, but you cannot take away the brand. You can try to knock it out, but it will always be there, and the Catholic Church will always be here. And I think that we're suffering through this crisis, this passion, so to speak. But it's a good time to be alive. You can smell the smoke, but once you can see the battlefield clearly, it brings a lot of peace, and we know who's in charge. And it's certainly not the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds or the high finance that's back. I think they're small chips on the table compared to what's really going on. But that's kind of a summary of.
John, thank you so much. Are you coming back again? And what will you show us next week? If you want to come back again, feel free to say no.
No, I'm happy. I feel a little bit intimidated, frankly, because I'm just John. I don't have a PhD in front of my name, and what I do have is just the street smarts of living here, and striving to understand on my own what to make sense of the madness. And it just all these epiphanies came, and frankly, It's very simple. The Catholic Church is the truth in the story. I believe in everything the Catholic Church teaches, everything. I do not doubt one iota, and that brings a lot of peace. And so if this can help people that don't see it that way, then maybe through my conviction, you'll have a second,
and
thought.
how can people, do you have, are you in other shows? So how can people contact you? Are you open to be contacted directly, or do you have a website or something like that that people can refer to?
No, ma'am. I don't have a website. The only people that contacted me have been the enemy.
Oh, okay.
To join their club, they go join their secret men's clubs, and it's kind of funny, getting letters from someone saying you can't tell anybody, but you're going to be asked to get,
Okay,
goodness.
so listen,
Yeah.
people who have a comment can leave. I always say, you are welcome to agree or disagree, but please don't come with bad faith to insult or to mock or to, because I'll remove you immediately. I don't want any filth in my channel, okay? But people will be leaving comments, and you are very free to answer them, yeah, as you wish.
Sure, no,
yeah?
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't go and show I've been on with stuff. The same purpose, I'd sent some information to a gentleman in Texas named Dr. Douglas Haugen, and he's got a show called Dr. Deep State. But I mean, frankly,
What is the name? What is the name of the show?
Dr. Deep State.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Douglas Haugen, and he's a geopolitical expert. He's very smart. He's a brilliant man, and he has got. I've seen you from Europe and himself in the United States, and then there's a man in Brazil called Professor Carlos Bezerra, Bezerra, who lives in Rio. That it's just absolutely fantastic material. Your material is absolutely fantastic. I've learned a lot, so I'm very grateful. I'm happy to help however I can. And if someone wants to accuse me or whatever, I could care less, frankly. I mean, I'm standing on. I just didn't spend 8 years in this stuff to come out here and say and expose myself for trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's just, it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm. That's great, John. Yeah, we have to stop. But thank you so very much. So, shall we meet again next Thursday?
Sure, I'm happy. I'm happy to meet whenever you want to.
Okay, that's great. So bring us some whatever you want to talk about. Thank you so very much. I am really very, very grateful. This is a lot of work that you have done and that you are doing, and sometimes we depend on a brave man to, take out the sword and be able to fight with dignity and nobility. That is how I feel about it, even though the world may be against you. So I thank you so much for your nobility of character and for because you're doing what you consider to be the truth. You're not there to deceive anybody. That is how I feel about it. And I thank you very, very much for having come. And I'll see you next Thursday, okay?
Yes, ma'am. I'm looking forward to it, Lolly. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.